Here's a rewritten version of the story, expanded slightly for smoother flow and natural pacing, while removing all headings, bullet points, tables, and any structural breaks. It reads as one continuous, engaging narrative. This all started when an HOA president thought she could steal my family's 80-year-old ranch and turn it into luxury condos. That turned out to be the biggest mistake of her miserable life. I still remember watching through my security cameras as Cordelia Blackthorne threw herself against my new biometric gate at 2 o'clock in the morning, screaming threats after pounding on that steel barrier for 3 straight hours. Her perfectly applied makeup was streaked down her cheeks by then. For 3 weeks, she had called every government agency, from the local county office all the way to Washington, D.C., demanding they force me to tear down my gate on my own property. By the end, she'd blown through $47,000 of stolen HOA money trying to destroy me. In the end, she would serve 3 years in federal prison, lose her house, and become the laughingstock of our entire county. But let's go back to the beginning. My name is Dex Morrison. I'm 45, a recently divorced software engineer who had spent way too long suffocating in Portland's concrete jungle. You know that soul-crushing feeling when you're paying $3,000 a month just to stare at your neighbor's brick wall? That was my life. Then my eccentric Uncle Rusty passed away and left me $400,000. Uncle Rusty was a family legend for his creative solutions to bureaucratic problems. He once built a trebuchet to launch his neighbor's illegally parked car right back onto their property. And yes, it was totally legal after he checked the city ordinances himself. With 2 teenage kids who deserved better than weekend visits to my shoebox apartment, I started hunting for rural property. I found an incredible 47-acre ranch in Millfield County, Oregon, a creek running through old-growth timber, a barn begging for restoration, and a price of $380,000 for land worth easily twice that. Red flag? Sure. Did I care? Not even a little. The seller, Bill Hutchkins, was a sweet elderly rancher desperate to move closer to his grandkids in Arizona. Tears streamed down his weathered cheeks when he handed over the keys. "She's been good to 3 generations of my family," he whispered, voice cracking. "You treat her right." Moving day brought that crisp October air that smells like freedom and would smoke. I could feel the rough bark of century-old pines under my palms and hear gravel crunching under the moving truck's tires like nature's welcome mat. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely hopeful. That's when the devil in designer khakis appeared. Cordelia Blackthorne, 52, was the self-proclaimed community standards coordinator of the adjacent Willowbrook Estates. Picture your worst middle school principal crossed with a tax auditor driving a white Lexus SUV with custom plates that read Rules 1. Willowbrook was 200 cookie-cutter houses where the HOA ruled everything from acceptable doormat colors to maximum dog-walking duration. These people measured grass height with actual rulers and kept spreadsheets tracking neighbor compliance violations. My ranch predated their suburban paradise by 80 years, but we shared Meadowlark Lane as an access road. Old Bill had been neighborly, letting HOA residents jog along his property boundaries and walk their designer dogs. Cordelia clicked across my driveway in spotless tennis shoes, clutching her clipboard like a religious artifact. Her voice dripped fake sweetness that made your fillings ache. "Excuse me," she announced, excusing absolutely nothing. "You'll need HOA approval for that moving truck." I set down boxes containing my kids' new bunk beds, pine shavings still clinging to the cardboard. "Ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but my property isn't part of your HOA. Her practiced smile twitched. "Meadowlark Lane falls under shared community standards. That truck violates our non-resident vehicle restrictions." She thrust a 47-page rule book at me, certain sections pre-highlighted like a legal brief. I told her calmly that I owned the property outright, and the access road predated her development by decades. That's when her mask cracked completely. Her voice pitched higher and sharper. "We'll just see about that." She whipped out her phone, photographing my license plates while pulling an actual tape measure from her purse to document the truck's dimensions. She called city code enforcement right there in my driveway, speaking loud enough for me to hear every poisonous word. As three other residents jogged past during her performance, I caught their expressions, pure fear. These people were genuinely terrified of her. One elderly gentleman actually crossed the street to avoid making eye contact. As Cordelia climbed back in her Lexus, she delivered her parting shot through the rolled-down window. "This neighborhood has standards, Mr. Morrison. You better learn them fast." Watching her drive away, I thought about Uncle Rusty's trebuchet and wondered what other creative solutions this situation might require. From there, the harassment escalated quickly. By week 2, I had a city inspector knocking at 7 a.m. over anonymous noise complaints. Even though I hadn't started any renovation work, and the loudest sound on my property was the creek babbling over smooth river stones. The inspector, a tired-looking guy named Pete, apologized while walking the land. "Look, I have to respond to complaints, but this is pretty obviously bogus." Someone described specific power tool sounds and construction debris that clearly don't exist. He gestured at my pristine, untouched barn. The same day, 3 different utility companies showed up for service verification: electric, water, and gas, all claiming reports of irregular usage patterns. The gas guy actually laughed when I pointed out I didn't even have gas service connected yet. My postal carrier, Jimmy, filled me in on the bigger picture while leaning against his mail truck in the afternoon sun. "Man, she's been doing this to folks for years. Remember the Kowalski family? Single mom with 3 kids. Cordelia filed so many complaints about inappropriate children's toys in their yard that the poor woman moved away just to get some peace." I started digging deeper, and the pattern emerged. Cordelia had systematically targeted anyone who didn't fit her suburban cookie-cutter vision. An elderly veteran with a PTSD service dog got aggressive animal complaints weekly. A Hispanic contractor received citations for parking his 20-year-old pickup on his own driveway. An Asian family had their foreign cooking odors labeled a violation of community aesthetic standards. Her method was brilliant in its cruelty: death by 1,000 bureaucratic paper cuts. No single complaint was worth fighting, but the cumulative harassment drove people away like psychological warfare. I spent an afternoon at the county courthouse, breathing in the smell of old paper and industrial carpet cleaner while diving into dusty property records. My fingers turned black from decades-old documents when I found a gold mine. My ranch held easement rights dating back to 1943. Not only was Meadowlark Lane not under HOA control, but technically the HOA had been using my family's road for the past 5 years without permission. Uncle Rusty's grandfather had built that road with his own hands and a borrowed steamroller. And here I've been apologizing for using my own damn driveway. I called Maxine Torres, the local attorney who specialized in property rights. She took one look at the HOA's cease and desist letter, demanding I paint my 80-year-old barn to match their approved beige palette, remove my unsightly split-rail fence from the Truman administration, and somehow make my property architecturally consistent with houses built 7 decades later, and burst into laughter. "Mr. Morrison, this letter is worth less than the paper it's printed on, but it does give us grounds for a harassment complaint." My counter-strategy was simple: document everything and file formal complaints. But Cordelia escalated further. She organized a community safety patrol, recruiting board members to take shifts watching my property with binoculars trained on my barn. They claimed I was suspicious for working after dark in my own workshop. The absurdity hit me while organizing Uncle Rusty's old tools by lamplight. These people were surveilling me for the crime of being productive after sunset. Then she showed up during my morning coffee on the porch, heels clicking aggressively, perfume mixing nauseatingly with mountain pine air. "You think you're so smart?" she hissed. "I know exactly who you are, Dex Morrison. Divorced, unemployed, living off inheritance money. What kind of example does that set for our children?" She'd been investigating me, digging up personal details only available through background checks or social media stalking. This woman had crossed from petty harassment into something much darker. Threatening my kids was her biggest mistake. I spent that night researching everything about Cordelia Blackthorne, building a complete profile of a woman who'd abused power for years. What I found made my software engineer brain light up. She had been catastrophically sloppy with her shell company, Medort Development, LLC. Incorporation papers listed her as both registered agent and principal owner, directly violating Oregon's conflict of interest statutes for HOA board members. Even better, she'd used the HOA's tax-exempt status to purchase materials for her personal renovations. Half the community improvement receipts matched premium kitchen appliances in her Facebook remodel photos. 3 days later, I came home to find my gate entrance vandalized with vile spray paint. My 4K cameras had captured everything. Cordelia herself, at 2:47 a.m., dressed in black like a deranged suburban ninja, bringing a stepladder to reach higher sections. Deputy Martinez wasn't amused. "Ma'am, that's destruction of property and criminal mischief. One more incident and you're looking at arrest." But the real turning point came when my attorney uncovered that my great-grandfather had retained exclusive rights to the mountain spring feeding my creek, and every single house in Willowbrook Estates depended on water flowing across my property. I could legally cut off their entire water supply tomorrow. The nuclear option. 200 families without water with one phone call. But I realized using that power would make me no better than her. Those houses contained innocent families, kids doing homework, elderly folks watching the evening news. Then Cordelia made her final catastrophic mistake. At midnight, my security alerts went off. She wasn't alone. 3 figures in dark clothing were pouring industrial herbicide directly into my wellhead, the source of my family's drinking water. The footage was crystal clear. Cordelia directing 2 men as they dumped the poison. Environmental terrorism that could have killed my entire family. I didn't call the deputy this time. I called the FBI's Environmental Crimes Unit, the State Attorney General, and a reporter from the Portland Tribune. While I enhanced the video, I could make out license plates. One vehicle belonged to City Councilman Bradley Fleming. The other was registered to a development consultant for Metork LLC. The conspiracy unraveled. Bradley owed Cordelia's husband $50,000 in gambling debts. Metork Development had preliminary approval for a $8.4 million luxury subdivision contingent on acquiring my ranch. Cordelia held a 25% silent partnership. Every harassment campaign had been a calculated move in a massive land grab disguised as community standard enforcement. She had been running this scam for a decade, systematically targeting vulnerable families, elderly widows, single mothers, veterans, minorities, driving them out so her developer network could profit. 12 families destroyed over 10 years. 12 properties seized through psychological warfare. The HOA's missing $127,000 matched her home renovation costs down to the penny. I formed a coalition in Uncle Rusty's old barn. Javier from the hardware store, reporter Rosa Martinez, attorney Maxine, food truck owner Martha, and eventually 37 affected families. We documented everything with military-grade surveillance, encrypted communications, and bulletproof evidence. Federal agencies coordinated through Rosa's contacts. We let Cordelia think she was winning while building the case. The climax came in an emergency city council meeting where Cordelia tried to push through eminent domain seizure of my ranch on fabricated public safety grounds. Instead, 184 residents packed the room. News crews filmed everything, and Rosa announced Cordelia's arrest for attempted arson the night before. State investigators revealed the decade-long pattern of fraud, embezzlement, and civil rights violations. Federal RICO charges were coming. One by one, residents shared their stories of harassment. I stood up last and announced I'd donated 30 acres of my ranch to establish the Uncle Rusty Memorial Nature Preserve, a public park protected forever from development. The room erupted in applause that shook the windows. Cordelia completely lost control, screaming incoherently as deputies moved in. 6 months later, I'm sitting on my porch watching my kids build a treehouse in the oak tree Cordelia's crew somehow missed. Their laughter mixes with the creek's gentle babble. Cordelia got 3 years in federal prison for environmental crimes, plus 2 more for embezzlement and fraud. Our class action lawsuit brought a $1.8 million settlement for the victims. Javier expanded his business. Martha opened a permanent restaurant. Her best-selling item is the extra spicy kimchi tacos, and the new HOA board eliminated most of the arbitrary rules. The nature preserve has hiking trails, educational signage, and protected habitat for endangered salmon. Neighborhood kids gather in Uncle Rusty's old workshop for tutoring and science projects. We launched a scholarship fund for trade school students from families hit by bureaucratic harassment. Rose's series won awards and sparked HOA reform legislation across Oregon. Every evening, I walk the preserve trails that wind through land Cordelia wanted to pave over. The biometric gate still stands, open to friends, sealed against tyranny. Annual property rights festivals draw families from across the Northwest to celebrate resistance against abuse. Life has a way of bringing the right people together when communities heal. And that's how one family's stubborn streak, a lot of documentation, and a whole lot of community turn a nightmare into something beautiful.